we sort of use it as a catchphrase, right? That Ukrainians are so resilient and they're so strong. Resilience is a trauma response. So what's the other choice, right? When resilience and strength is your only choice, it is still exhausting and overwhelming and tragic that somebody becomes resilient because of trauma. We see resilience as this very positive thing, right? Oh, you're so resilient. It's such a positive thing. Like you've pushed forward through such traumatic events and you've done so much great stuff. What was the other option? There was no other option. The only option was to survive and move forward. We shouldn't use that as an excuse to not support people. Because we like to say that Ukraine is strong, Ukraine is resilient, they don't need our support. And that is not accurate.
Welcome back, everybody. Today's guest, Rebecca Wolf, is a volunteer with the 50 States for Ukraine military charity. She leads fundraisers and helps drive vehicles that the 50 States organization purchases from the UK to Ukraine, where they're converted into budget armored vehicles. She joined me from her home in Arizona to talk about her volunteer work and her work in the military mental health field in Ukraine. If what you hear today moves you, you can donate to the 50 States organization through a link that you'll find in the description. Yeah, so thanks again for making the time to chat. Can you introduce yourself?
My name is Rebecca Wolf, and I have been a volunteer in Ukraine since 2023. I am an accountant by trade. I also previously worked in the military mental health field. That's usually the volunteer expertise that I feel like I bring to the table in these situations. And then separately, I am also a truck driver. So I used to work in the horse industry in Mississippi, and I drove big trucks and hauled horses across the South. And so, anyway, those were the two skill sets that I kind of brought to the table, and I showed up to utilize those.
Have you been able to use your truck driving skills in any of your volunteer work?
In the delivering, yeah, of the trucks, that's been the key. I love to drive. Like I legitimately could have been a big rig trucker as a job because I just love road trips. So I didn't know that I would use that skill before I got there. I really thought that I would be, doing something in the military mental health field. That was very slow to develop. I, make a lot of good connections and I have a lot of good networking, but there is still a lot of stigma around mental health and certainly with the military and veterans. And so I just found that driving trucks, fundraising for trucks and delivering trucks was something I could jump into immediately and feel productively helpful right away.
So I was on your Instagram page and you describe yourself as American by birth, Scottish by soul, and Ukrainian by heart.
So I'm about half Scottish by ancestry. I went to Scotland for the first time in 2019. I am obsessed with bagpipes. So they say that that's very normal for people with Scottish heritage. And I went for the first time in 2019, and it was very much like coming home. Like I was immediately very, very comfortable and happy there, aside from the weather. I'm not huge on the extreme cold weather. Honestly, I've never had bad food anywhere in Edinburgh. So haggis is legitimately one of my favorite things on the planet.
Yeah, it's not that
Um,
weird either. It's like, I
yeah.
think people are
If
freaked
you've
out
ever
by the
had,
packaging that it comes in.
right,
Yeah.
right. If you've ever had corned beef hash, like it's their version of corned beef hash with different meat and different carbs.
So haggis is okay. How do you feel about black pudding?
I don't love the black pudding. I usually just don't get it. To be honest, it's fine. It's just not great. And I make an effort not to waste my calories, right? Like I
Mm,
have a certain amount of calories I'm going to eat in a day, and I'm not going to waste it on something I don't enjoy,
on a type of blood sausage, not your
right?
thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's okay. It's just not great. It's not as good as haggis in my opinion.
Tastes
That's
like
fair.
rusty
It's an
nails.
acquired taste.
Yeah.
You're not wrong.
So I had a question that I forgot to ask at the beginning. So I saw
That's okay.
I was on your Instagram and I saw just photos from like everywhere. yeah, a bunch of
Oh
European
yeah.
countries plus like Hawaii,
Yes.
I think at some point.
Yeah.
How do you arrange your life to make so much room for travel?
I work remotely. So that is key step number one is that my work environment is 100% remote. The company I work for and the people I work for are very supportive of what I do and very supportive of me traveling. They are also my first priority. Like my job is always my first priority. And they know that. They know that I'm going to dedicate myself to making sure things are accomplished. And so because I have proven myself reliable, they give me a lot of leeway. We have a very flexible schedule. Pretty much anytime I'm on a plane or a train, I'm just working as I'm traveling to a location, but I can work as much during the week, on the weekend. My hours are completely flexible.
So you're taking advantage of that as much as you can to make this
Yeah,
crazy lifestyle possible.
absolutely.
Yeah, I read some of the Ukraine related articles on your blog, and you mentioned that you stay in Kyiv for 6 months. So you're working full time and then also volunteering while you're there?
Yes. Yeah. So my work schedule again is fairly flexible, but I work in general between about 2 p.m. and midnight. So I get in my 8 hours somewhere in that time frame. And I mean, sometimes I can work later than that as well, because in general, I work Eastern Standard Time hours. So that's late evening, nighttime over there. And that allows me my days free to volunteer and I deliver trucks on the weekends. Don't get me wrong, it took me a while to work into all of that and have all those pieces fit together because my problem is if I don't have time for something, it's my own personal mental health that I always drop first. I always want to help others and I always forget to take care of myself. So prioritizing something like going to a gym, right? 5 days a week. That's actually the hardest part for me. I eat really healthy. I love what I'm doing. I'm active. I love the botanical garden there. It's one of my favorite places. But like prioritizing actually going out and doing something for myself it's not necessarily volunteering, it's not necessarily working, it's just something that, supports myself. That's always the hardest part for me.
So, just a quick post edit note here. The Minnesota group of the 50 States for Ukraine organization, we just closed our fundraiser for an armored truck for the 53rd Brigade. We raised exactly $12,500. And when you complete your fundraiser, or like if you raise enough money, Car for Ukraine and 50 States for Ukraine, they make it possible for you to actually travel to Ukraine and deliver your truck either to their processing facility in Lviv, or you can also you can like actually deliver your truck to the actual unit that's going to be using it like on the front line. And that yeah, so that is the subject that we that's what we started talking about here.
Are you considering delivering it?
Yeah, I would love to. I do not have the vacation time.
Ah,
So yeah, I think it's gonna have to wait until
understood.
truck number two, yeah, which I'm kind of bummed about. But like at first, I was like, oh, I shouldn't do it. Like I could have gone if I had arranged my vacation time differently, but I was like, no, no, I shouldn't buy a plane ticket. I'll just donate the money instead for the plane
I
ticket.
really understand.
Okay. Do you, yeah, how do you, like,
No,
do you think it's valuable
I
for us to go there?
yes and no. I think that everybody should make that decision for themselves. Everybody has a different, right, motivator for going. But I think about that a lot because I attend a lot of other events that are specific to Ukraine support. And so one of the events is quite expensive. It's probably cost me around $5,000 to go. It's a week in DC. It felt valuable in the beginning when I was doing it, and then over time, it just my personal involvement in it, like support what they're doing, but my personal involvement has felt less needed. And so I just realized $5,000 is a third of a truck, right? I could donate that and see a very tangible usage of that. So I really do understand that everybody has to, make that determination for themselves.
Do you think you being there and publicizing it on your social media has helped with fundraising?
I do think so. Yeah. I meet a lot of new people because of the information I'm sharing. And I think on both sides, Americans and Ukrainians, and then just sort of a random grouping of other foreigners who are supportive. And I think that having that first point of view of this, like I just got back, in fact, I've been back about 1 month. And initially the questions were about, this has been a really, really shitty winter in an extreme, much worse than it has been in past winters that I've been there. And so I think having that firsthand knowledge of being able to share that and being able to say, it really sucks over there right now, I think that is really valuable.
Okay. So you're not just, you know, it it goes beyond the personal feeling that you get of traveling there and feeling like you're helping. You're also a sort of a primary source, basically, for everyone in your life and everyone
Yeah,
that you speak to. That, yeah, here's an American who's been there and says
yes.
that it is really bad and they need help.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it's a continual advocating for what's happening there.
As I was reading your blog, I saw this story that you had about traveling throughout Europe, and Ukraine was the only country in which, as you were like putting your luggage up on a rack, Ukraine was the only country where men or soldiers would like stand up and be like, "Oh, like let me give you a hand."
Absolutely.
Yeah, so I detected very strong feminist sensibilities in your blog. So how do you reconcile your feminism with, with a culture and a country that is maybe seen as a little more traditional as far as gender roles are concerned?
I do consider myself a feminist in sort of the classical term of, I don't think it's about men and women being equals. I think it's about men and women having equal access to the same things. And I consider myself a conservative Christian. So a conservative Christian environment and culture is very, very comfortable to me. Now, obviously, I'm a very strong-willed woman and I'm not afraid to advocate for myself. And I've never had a problem in Ukraine, and in fact, I feel very comfortable in the Ukrainian culture. I find Ukrainians to be very welcoming and very kind, and I will caveat that by saying there is this, we call it the American privilege. There is definitely some privilege in being an American volunteering in Ukraine and being viewed in a certain light because of that, where I am welcome anywhere. Like it gets my foot in the door in places where a Ukrainian NGO would maybe not get their foot in the door because they're not Americans. And I am very careful to use that for good. I do think there are people who have abused it. Not that I have names or anything, but we joke that there's two kinds of foreigners in Ukraine. They're all crazy. Everyone's crazy. All the foreigners in Ukraine are crazy. However, there is benevolent crazy and there is malicious crazy. And so if you're there because you believe it's the right thing to do and you want to be productively helpful in a positive way, right, then you're this benevolent crazy. You're crazy enough to be in a war zone, but you want to be helpful. And then the malicious crazy, there's also a good and bad on that side. There's two types because there's one type that is they are there for the right reasons, right? They're there because they believe in the cause. They don't necessarily love Ukraine, but they are addicted to war, right? These are soldiers who don't want to go home and be civilians. So it's easier to be in a war. But again, still good people, right? They're on our side. They're not killing indiscriminately. They're following the rules. They're in the military. And then the bad malicious are the ones that are just randomly doing their own thing maliciously. And those are the ones that generally get arrested and deported.
What does that mean exactly? Like people doing their own thing? Is this like manipulating the
It's
situation
it's a
for corruption?
Yeah, some of that, sure. I would say it's kind of a variety. It's not like a simple explanation. There are definitely people there who are escaping warrants in the US. So they're there because they thought there was no extradition. And then because Ukraine wants to cooperate with the US and hopes for support, if the US says, hey, we know this guy's in Ukraine and he has a warrant, then they'll ship him back.
He said all foreigners in Ukraine are crazy. Uh,
And I mean that as kindly as possible because I do lump myself in that category. But I also like to say you have to be a little bit crazy to think you can change the world. And so by crazy, I mean willing to step outside the box, right? And willing to do things that other people say are impossible. You have to be a little bit crazy to go to a war zone and risk your life to volunteer, right?
this is a sort of deliberately provocative question, but like, dude, you're an American. Why do you care so much about what happens in some Eastern European country?
It is complicated. I have several explanations. The easiest one is that I just couldn't sit at home and do nothing. I really felt a duty that if I can do something in person to make their situation better, I absolutely will do that. I do believe that the US had a duty to support and protect Ukraine based on the Budapest Memorandum. I also I have a friend who really questioned me on this in a kind way. Like he was really trying to understand what are my motivations. And it's easy to say, oh, it's the right thing to do. And it's easy to say Americans should be supporting. And when we dug into it, he said, this is our burden to carry. Why are you here? You could be at home. And my instant response was, why would you carry this alone? To me, it's not their burden. Like it has landed on their shoulders and they are carrying it better than a lot of others would. But I want to carry that burden with them. I want to share the burden of the war with them. And I don't want them to stand alone.
So this was a Ukrainian friend of yours.
Yeah, we were, this was while I was there. He helped me deliver a friend, an American friend who joined a Ukrainian unit, and we delivered him to his new unit with one of his fellow soldiers. And so I joke that we have this, it's road trip therapy. Whenever you're trapped in a car with somebody for 16 hours, right? You have these very deep conversations. You get past the bullshit and you have these very deep conversations. And it was actually towards the end of the trip when he started to question me. And he knows he's a veteran. He knows the work I've done. Like he was just really genuinely trying to understand what my motivations were.
It just sort of seems strange to be maybe a little bit defensive about like receiving help from a foreigner or from a foreign country. Like why did he need to question you in that way?
I don't think it was defensive. I think it was more of like he really felt this. He's my age. He's in his 50s and he joined immediately. Right away he went down and joined and served for the first 3 years. I think he very much feels that they carry this mantle of the war, right? That Ukraine carries it and Ukrainians feel that. They very much feel that they are carrying this burden, for lack of a better word. And I think they very much recognize that they wouldn't push this burden off on anyone else that didn't ask for it. And it's theirs and they're going to fight it. And don't get me wrong, he's had a lot of support from others, from other foreigners. He works in a very multicultural world. And so he knows a lot of foreigners as well. And I think I really think he was like seeking a deeper answer than just, it's the right thing to do, right? Because that's sort of the quick response that everyone gives. Well, it's the right thing to do. And he was like, but why? But why do you feel it's the right thing to do?
So coming back to the United States, are your friends and family in general sympathetic to what you're doing?
Yes, predominantly, yes. My dad is a retired Navy pilot, and then he was a Delta Airlines pilot, and then he was a youth minister for a while. So he was actually one of the first to encourage me to volunteer in more of a ministry type of realm. And I tried that for the first year. I tried to connect with he knew a couple of groups that were ministry based. I knew right away that I wanted to go and I wanted to have a plan, right? I wanted to like have an NGO or a nonprofit that I was specifically volunteering with, and I wanted to have a plan of how to get there. And these three different groups, I had multiple conversations with them, and one of them specifically was they were delivering goods and needed truck drivers, right? Right up my alley. But all of them had very good hearts and were doing good works, but were very unorganized in ways that felt unsafe to me. As a woman going to, be there with this group, I didn't feel safe, for lack of a better word. And not even like unsafe from the group themselves, but just unsure of their ability to keep me safe in situations that they were putting themselves in. And so these first three groups just did not work out. And I kept waiting. And then 2023 rolled around and I was like getting a little impatient. So I just made the plan to go. I just thought, okay, well, I'm just going to go to Poland. And I had a couple of connections. In fact, I knew two people. I knew two people in Ukraine. I was supporting a nonprofit. And then I had met a woman who works in the travel and tourism industry. And she was talking about doing this type of tourism later that would be like reconstruction tourism. So we had some fantastic conversations and I wanted to go meet her. And so eventually at some point, these two people were pretty encouraging of like, just go ahead and come to Kyiv and we'll meet up and we'll, figure out how you can volunteer. And so eventually that's what I did.
So why exactly should, beyond reasons like it's the right thing to do, or we want to sort of help Ukrainians carry this burden that history has, or Russia has placed upon them, beyond those sorts of reasons, why should the rest of the world care about what happens to these people?
I like to think that were this Germany or Austria in the 1940s, I would be hiding people in my attic, right? I I can't even think of what the right word is. I want to say frustration. The frustration that our society continues to repeat the same mistakes over and over again and hope for a different outcome is shockingly insane. I think there should be concern. Like concern is such a small word, right? Uh, there should be concern that in this day and age, we will allow a dictator to take over an independent nation. And that is a very slippery slope and sets a very bad precedent. And really, anybody who's traveled in Eastern Europe understands that, right? Like if you've spent any time in Estonia or Latvia or Lithuania or even Poland, even Ukraine, there they understand this sentiment. They understand that this is just step one. And so it's very easy for us as Americans to be very far removed from that, right? We're not worried about anyone knocking at our borders, but it's very easy for us to be comfortable and not consider the gravity of the situation and not consider how the geopolitics of the European continent affect us as a nation and as a people.
So Russia invades on February 24th of 2022, and throughout 2022, the line in the media, the political line was we have to support Ukraine in order to deter other countries with imperial ambition from, thinking that like it's open season and,
Right.
imperial conquest is back in again. Um,
Right.
yeah, that was 2022. It's now 2026. Do you think that ship has sailed and other countries have gotten the message that like it is open season now?
In theory, yes. I do think we have given permission that a dictator is allowed to take what he wants. I think it would depend on what that looks like because we didn't throw, even though we signed the Budapest Memorandum and we said this, right? We support, we will protect you. It was still a different category than the way we view Taiwan or Israel. And so I am slightly surprised that China has not made a move because I feel like they have enough evidence to understand that the US would likely not respond. But whether or not that's true, would the US respond? I can't, make any assumptions there.
In 2014, when this all started through the seizure of Crimea and areas of Donetsk and Luhansk, I had just among my friends and family, we had some discussions and we did not really understand the situation at that time. But I think a lot of Americans, we were just coming out of the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. Like I think a lot of Americans viewed Russia's military aggression through the view of like, well, who are U.S. citizens to criticize Russia for its military aggression because we just finished like obliterating like two countries in the Middle East. What would you say to an American or a European or whoever who looks back on the history of the United States as the sort of imperial power and then looks at what Russia is doing in Ukraine and just kind of shrugs, like, who are we to judge the Russian state for what they're doing?
I think the most simplistic answer for me is the way in which, or maybe the purpose in which past aggressions, for lack of a better word, past wars have been initiated. I, and maybe this is a little bit of a rose-colored glasses view on it. I would like to think the US didn't have the same type of goals slash designs on the countries that we have attempted to liberate, not my word, in a much different manner than the way Russia views Ukraine and Ukrainians. I think that would be like the most simple answer. And yes, that does make a lot of assumptions in viewing the US as the good guy, right? We sort of have this saying that everybody knows Russia is the bad guy. Is there anybody on the planet who doesn't believe Russia is the bad guy? I don't want to say this across the board because I'm absolutely sure that war crimes have happened. I don't want to say that that's never happened before. The US has never had war crimes. I think that predominantly the US certainly makes an effort to adhere to Geneva Convention rules. Russia absolutely does not. Russia absolutely has no qualms about breaking every rule, every war crime. And I again, I admit this is probably a very rose-colored glasses look. I think predominantly we can agree that the US has upheld Geneva Convention agreements.
Do you think that it's possible for Ukraine to lose at this point?
I think that depends on your definition of a loss. I will say this. Ukraine believes in victory. Victory is the only option. First of all, as an American, I don't believe I have any opinion or any right to an opinion on what peace looks like, what victory looks like. That's 100% Ukraine and 100% Ukrainians. I will say that using Crimea as an example, we know what it looks like to attempt a peace treaty with Russia, right? We know that that's not worth the paper it's written on. And predominantly, Ukrainians are fairly united in not leaving behind the occupied territories. So, this is just something that I personally say, if there is some type of a ceasefire and or peace treaty at the current lines that are, the current occupation, what did everybody die for? If we were going to go ahead and agree to give up those territories, why did all of those losses, what do they mean, right? And again, I 100% believe that that is the Ukrainian right to want their territory back and support that, right? Ukraine believes in victory. And this is actually this is a weird correlation, but I used to work in suicide prevention, and there's this movement called zero suicides. If you don't set the goal, how do you reach it? Everybody says, like, there's no way you can get down to zero suicides. Okay. But if we don't set zero as a goal, how do we reach that? So Ukraine has victory as the goal. If you don't set it as the goal, how do you reach it? And I 100% believe that Ukraine has lots of creative ideas, right, towards victory. I think Ukraine has proven time and time again that we should not be underestimating them. And as somebody that is in Ukraine and wants to be there long term, I believe in their victory, and that's why I do what I do, to have some small piece that is helpful.
So you've been going there since 2023. You mentioned earlier that this winter has just been horrible. How has the country changed over your visits? Like, how do you notice what changes in the country and the people do you notice as you go back?
I don't see a loss of optimism. Like, I don't see a defeated country. Absolutely not. When we're doing fundraising, I have all these different friends, right, who all fundraise for all these different things. And I used to say, we're crowdsourcing a war, right? That's what we're doing. And then somebody corrected me and said, we're crowdsourcing a defense. And I think that that's an important distinction, which isn't to say that there's 100% of Ukrainians that support that, right? I mean, it's the same as the US. There are always people who don't agree with the current administration. There's always people who have a different opinion. I would say predominantly everybody is doing something to support the people they know in the war. So everybody who has family members, they are fundraising for them. They are sending care packages. They are doing something to support their family members who are serving, even to the point where people are 3D printing drone parts, right? There's a significant variety of things that can be done. I have not seen any difference well, maybe that's not true. I haven't seen a diminishment of that support. I have seen it ramped up. I have seen and met more people who are doing more. Like they weren't as involved in the first few years and now they are more involved. There is still, even when the weather was horrific, there are still like glimpses of life and gatherings and celebrations. Like life continues to happen. Like you continue to do your life, and that is very much embraced. It's okay to celebrate things that are happening because life is short and you should still do that. So I would say that the longer I've been there, the more I have understood some of that within the culture. And I definitely have not seen it, any diminishment of that.
Yeah, that's something that the Ukrainian friends I've made have often talked about. Like like this one lady, she was going to go get her nails done as like the shaheds were hitting around her neighborhood, and I was like, what are you thinking? Like, stay in the basement.
Yeah,
Like, why take that kind of risk? And yeah, and her response was like, if I just sat around and cried all the time, like,
right.
why am I even
What's the
alive? I
point?
could have died in one of those drone
Yeah.
strikes. I have to live my life.
That's very much a common sentiment. I mean, there are definitely people that still go to the shelter, and that's, I 100% respect that everybody has a different risk level, even among the foreigners and the volunteers. I definitely am the type that I'm just going to continue living my life and doing as much as I can to be helpful. So it doesn't, you'd be amazed what you could get used to.
Yeah, that's what they tell me. I'm a little gun shy. I don't know how brave I would be.
Well, and that's okay. Every time I go on when I'm with the NAFO group, we always have some newbies, right? Every time. And so when we get to the hotel, like we show them where the shelter is and we help them put the app on their phone. And, we make sure they have all the tools. And some of them go every time. And 100% I support that. But I also support continuing to live your life in the way that you feel is best.
Yeah, so when you visit Ukraine, do you just go to Lviv and snap some photos for the gram and then scoot back into safety in Poland? How far east have you been?
The furthest east I've been is Dnipro. I've delivered trucks there. I've delivered trucks to Kharkiv. I have not gotten to spend a lot of time there. Dnipro is a stunning city, absolutely beautiful. I would love to, like, we got to have a nice dinner with the soldiers and we hung out with them for a little bit and stayed in a fantastic hotel. Not only do I want to continue being helpful, but I want to see the country, right? I still want to visit places and I still want to do things. I shipped my car over, so I got to take a bus down to Odessa and I picked up my car in Odessa. So I got to go see the Black Sea. So I have had some very interesting adventures. Again, I love a road trip. Absolutely love to drive across Ukraine. It's absolutely stunning. And it's so much fun for me because I've done a lot of road trips in the US and I can be like, this looks like Iowa. And then a little further on, you're like, oh, this looks just like Alabama. Like it's just, there's these very different, ecosystems across the country. And it's a lot of fun for me to visit the different areas.
I was searching through some stuff on YouTube and I saw that you got a shout out from Britney, the
Mm,
famous
yeah, yeah.
Canadian tanker.
Yeah, we fundraised a truck for her. That was the Arizona Battalion. It was our first truck, I think, that we sent. Was to Brittany, which has already been taken out by a drone. So I suggested that we, hop on it and do another one, but I think she is being supported by Eyes on Ukraine right now, and they're doing a fundraiser for the 25th Brigade. I think we've given 5 trucks to 25th Brigade, different units there. So they're doing a big fundraiser for her unit.
So Britney the Canadian tanker is super famous at this point. Do you meet a lot of other foreign military volunteers while you're there?
Like in passing, I only had one really close friend that was he was in the Legion, and then he had an NGO, and then he died last year. And I do have a kind of a variety of friends who have been in Legion units or also in Azov. I volunteered with Azov 1 for a while, mostly because I had a friend there and I said, hey, I want to do some mental health trainings. And he said, come on down. So I put myself out there as somebody who offers support. So I do get kind of random messages sometimes like, hey, we're looking for IFACs, or hey, we're looking for, whatever it might be. Most recently, it has been the trucks because I am building that reputation for myself. So yes, I do have a variety of and not just Americans, a variety of foreign friends. But we also do, I would say, like I have an American cohort, sort of. Like as soon as you hear somebody is an American, you sort of lump us together, and then we offer support, right? So I have several friends that I'll just text them, "Hey, I'm heading back into Ukraine. What do you need?" I have one American Ukrainian friend who he was in Azov until recently. He has a Ford truck there. He shipped over, and he can't get Ford parts. So almost every time I come over, I'm bringing some kind of random Ford part that he needs. So that's a thing that I do.
Do foreign volunteers discuss their motivations for, sorry, do foreign military volunteers, do they discuss their motivations for being there? Or by the time you're in and fighting, is that like so far down the priority list and everyone's just like, hey, yeah, let's go to work?
When I first meet people, I generally ask a few questions like, what brought you here? How long have you been here? That kind of thing. I think probably once they're in the units, no, they probably aren't having those conversations. They just know that they're all together for the same cause. But certainly when I meet new people, I just, try to get a feel for who they are and what they did in the US and why they showed up.
So you mentioned you had one friend who died last year.
Yeah.
Yeah. What is your impression of the fatality rate among foreign military volunteers?
It is significant. It is not any less or more significant than the Ukrainian military. It's, you essentially have the same chance of being killed based on what your job is, obviously. Some jobs are closer to the front lines than others. I think probably the percentages of foreigners who are dying is much smaller just because there's a much smaller percentage of foreigners in the military, in the units. So obviously the Ukrainians are a much higher rate, but I 100% know quite a few foreigners who have died.
Yeah, moving on to your relationships with Ukrainians themselves. I think I saw on your Instagram that you're a Duolingo user. Is that
Mhm.
has
Yes,
have you been using
I
that to
am.
help you learn Ukrainian?
Yeah, I use Duolingo mostly for vocabulary. Like it teaches you a lot of vocabulary and it's a lot of repetitive usage and decent pronunciation as well. I have a tutor. I do a language class with my tutor every Sunday. I also have a couple of friends who are sort of my just conversational chats. I have one here and I also have one in Ukraine. I also do an English language chat with a group of soldiers, a group of Ukrainian soldiers. And we do a little bit of both. Like we do a little bit of Ukrainian for me, like we'll speak Ukrainian and then we'll switch over to English. And that one is actually a lot of fun for me because they always ask me like what's happening in the news here. And there are certain things that happen that they don't understand the context and they want to know. They want to be like, why is this happening? Like Minneapolis, as an example. That was a topic we talked about quite a bit. I am learning very slowly. I know a lot of random words, and then I cannot necessarily plug those into coherent sentences. Very thankfully, Ukrainians are like delighted that I'm trying to learn, and so they're very, very forgiving, and they love it that I've just, popped out like four random phrases, and I can at least ask for what I want in the restaurant or the, coffee shop. I will say, anytime I try to practice my Ukrainian, they are so delighted that I speak English that they want to speak English. So that's a thing. It's hard for me to practice on anyone that speaks English because they immediately are like, oh, you're an American, and they want to switch to English, which 100% I love that. So I'm always happy to do that as well.
Yeah, it's both a privilege and maybe a detriment to your language learning. So, through your Instagram, it seems like you have made a lot of friends while you're over there. Have you observed changes in your Ukrainian friends in particular? Have you observed changes in their mental and emotional state throughout your friendship?
Yes and no. I would say it's a little more, again, not a decline, but more of like a roller coaster, which I think is a very normal mental health sort of response, right? Like mental health is not just a straight line and it's not necessarily just a decline. It can be a bit of a roller coaster. It depends on what's happening that day. It depends on if you've had your support system around you, right? I do have one friend that I meet with every time I'm there. The last time I was there, I could tell that she was a little more frazzled than I had seen previously. And I kind of made a point to spend a little more time with her, chit chat with her and do a few things with her. That's sort of the key factor is different people will struggle at different times based on different triggers, right? I work in peer support. I work in lived experience peer support because I have PTSD. And so part of peer support is recognizing when your friends are maybe a little less okay, right? And then spending a little extra time with that person and making sure that they're getting what they need. And I don't think it's any different there. And certainly maybe it's even more important there that we're all kind of keeping an eye on each other. And we do that very much in the American community as well. I have several women who are medics, and we keep an eye on each other and we touch base and make sure everybody's okay. So I think that the Ukrainian culture is built around these familial support systems to begin with. And so that is something that is going to help them.
Our final topic, the veterans issues. Did your work with the U.S. military or U.S. veterans in suicide prevention, did that prepare you for dealing with the issues that Ukrainian veterans are facing now?
Yes and no. They are dealing with different issues, not exactly the same triggers, not exactly the same situations, but I am really good at helping people no matter what they're going through. So it did prepare me in like a specialty way of like I have this expertise in just being really good at supporting people and being a good listener and coming across in a very non-judgmental, like accepting kind of way. So I think all of those things helped me. I think it also, this is a thing that I noticed when I first got there, because the first time I went, I thought I would be doing more mental health and less truck driving. But that didn't work out. But I was told, right, that mental health is not a thing we talk about in Ukraine, and that it's not going to be something that people want to talk about with you for a variety of reasons. There's still a lot of stigma around it, right? It's the same in the US. We're doing better. There's still a lot of stigma. So I think, especially when I first got there, I understood that I needed to learn the culture around mental health before I could be helpful in mental health. And so I just had a lot of conversations and I asked a lot of questions about culture and not specific to mental health, but like something as simple as food, right? Like talking about the culture around food. And I was genuinely interested in learning the culture. And I think that there was a piece of that that was flattering to Ukrainians, right? That this American had showed up and was like really interested in their culture. And so I never hit those barriers. I never had people say, I don't want to talk about that. Like people were very open, men and women, very open about discussing things and talking about things. Now, I do try to set a stage of acceptance by sharing my own stuff as well. So I'm very upfront that like I struggle with depression and I struggle with PTSD, and these are the things I carry day to day. It looks different. So some of that is probably at play, but I've very much found people to be very warm, very welcoming, very willing to talk about just about anything in this like safe one-on-one environment, right? Like it wasn't like a group setting. It was very much just let's have coffee and talk about what's going on. And so very early on, I was trying to like share this idea of peer support as a mental health role, that this was a thing that I did for veterans. And people, so I would be spending time with people, whether or not they were veterans, and we would just be chatting and supporting each other. And they would say to me, is this that peer support thing? And I'd be like, yeah, this is definitely peer support. And they were like, yeah, we do this all the time with each other. And so I think making that correlation that peer support is not this weird mental health thing. It's just a thing we do, that we support each other. We support the people we're, friends with. We support our family. It's this very normal day-to-day thing. I think that is something that I learned early on was already embedded in their culture. And so, to be honest, made those conversations really simple.
Are you familiar with the definition of, or have you heard the term moral injury before?
Mm,
Yeah, so just
yes.
for the listener, I'll
Yeah.
kind of explain. Yeah, so moral injury is basically the guilt and shame that comes from violating or being forced to violate your own moral code. Do you think that, so I asked this question as an American and like this is definitely not universal among American veterans, but I think moral injury is very complicated as
Right.
some veterans look back on what our
Yeah.
country did in Iraq and Afghanistan, and they sort of have suffered serious moral injury as they kind of think about their role in those conflicts. Do
Mm.
you um, do you think that Ukrainian veterans are experiencing the same sort of like internal conflict when they think about their role in the war, or is the war in Ukraine just so different from the American occupations of Iraq and Afghanistan that it's just not something that they really deal with?
I would bet dollars to donuts that some people are certainly more affected by it than others. At the same time, I would say it is very different than it is a very different war for us to send US soldiers into a foreign country to do their job than it is for Ukrainians to be defending their nation. That is a very different basis and a place to come from, which isn't to say that doesn't mean moral injury won't affect them, but I think it's not the same. I'm not even sure it's a fair comparison. And I do know, like, I have had a couple of conversations, and I know that there are pieces of the moral injury embedded in the bigger picture, but I don't think it's exactly the same as us sending American troops to do a job in a foreign country. I think there is a slight difference. I noticed, if you don't mind, I wanted to touch on the resilience because this is a thing that we sort of use it as a catchphrase, right? That Ukrainians are so resilient and they're so strong. The thing I like to share with people is that resilience is a trauma response. So this is an equation that I first learned of in dealing with children who had trauma. So if a child has zero supportive adults in their life and they have a traumatic event, so trauma plus zero support equals PTSD. Trauma plus one support person equals resilience. So yes, resilience is a thing that we use to protect ourselves, but it is a trauma response. Without trauma, you would not have resilience. So what's the other choice, right? When resilience and strength is your only choice, it is still exhausting and overwhelming and tragic that somebody becomes resilient because of trauma. And so I never want to downplay the driving factors behind resilience because we see resilience as this very positive thing, right? Oh, you're so resilient. It's such a positive thing. Like you've pushed forward through such traumatic events and you've done so much great stuff. And I always say, what was the other option? There was no other option. The only option was to survive and move forward. And so it is not a positive thing. It is not a intended result, right? It is not a wanted result. It is what we have. And I mean, as somebody who is strong and stubborn and resilient and who will get things done, I identify as hyper independent. And hyper independence is also called toxic independence. And I challenged some friends of mine who like to refer to it as that. Because again, what was the other choice? There was no one else in my life that would take care of all of these things. And so I did it on my own and I became someone who can solve anything on my own. It's still a trauma response. And so it affects everything in my life, right? It affects my relationships or lack thereof. I don't need anyone. And so that is detrimental to my ability to have a relationship. It's still a trauma response. So that is a thing that I like to share with people about resilience specifically, because we shouldn't use that as an excuse to not support people. Because we like to say that Ukraine is strong, Ukraine is resilient, they don't need our support. And that is not accurate.